Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Dogco Secrets podcast. My name is Michelle Klein. I'm your host, and I'm also the founder of Dogco Launch, where pet care companies come to grow and scale. And today's episode's a really special one for me because I have my friend Steve Beck on the podcast today. He is also going to be a speaker at the Dogco Summit, and I thought that this might be a really cool opportunity to help people get more familiar with Steve prior to the summit, because the work that he does is so fundamentally important and could impact so many companies in our industry that giving people context as to who he is, what he does, why it matters. We just needed to do this ahead of time. So I'm really excited. So thank you for joining today, Steve.
Super glad to be here, Michelle. It's good. It's so much fun to reconnect at this point. We've had a lot of touch points, shall we say, over a lot of years in figuring out what we're going to do when we grow up. So
Yep.
it's been fun. I mean, really the history and having those touch points and trading ideas and wins and losses and frustrations and highlights, everything. It's just so fun to be on the journey together and have these touch points at meaningful times. So thanks for having me on.
Maybe we'll start there. And I'm actually going to punt this question over to you as to how we know each other. You and I have a very fun history that I have no conscious memories where I didn't know who Steve Beck was because we've known each other that long. So how do we know each other?
Yeah, without going into all the details, longtime friend with your family. And so you and your brothers being, in a sense, watching you guys grow up and then tracking you through, really reconnecting once you got into the work world and all that stuff and just the different things that you have done. And I remember especially connecting during the social worker phase when you were getting your MSW and all that. And then that's where it started, to be able to really connect as adults, peers, figuring out life and trading ideas and doing all that stuff. So really cool.
Yeah.
Makes me feel old. Okay, let me just say.
I'm sorry.
I'm glad you're still want to talk with me. So that's really good.
So context for the audience, Steve is very good friends with my parents. And then about a decade ago, we started connecting on entrepreneurship things and just overlapping spheres of work. And then at some point, we just stopped inviting my parents and Steve and I started getting beer, which was super fun. And now we're about a decade into that. So Steve, maybe you could give the audience a little bit of context as to the work you do and what your focus is within your business.
Yeah. So the longest bit of context, I would just say for my whole life, the through line has been a fascination with human interactions and how people work together, how they solve problems together. In my career before launching into what I'm doing now, one of the roles I found myself in wasn't necessarily trying to be that, but I became within the organizations I was working for, I became a go-to person for people in conflict. For whatever reasons, people perceive me as approachable and trusted with, frustrations or different things that were happening in a team. And then also realized I had an ability to be able to be in rooms that were pretty tense and people were, a lot of emotion and that type of thing and be a calm presence in the room and an ability to listen well to people coming from different points of view and had some success, a lot of success, I would say, within the organizations I worked for to help people communicate, solve problems, figure out, how to move forward together. And it was just intuitive. It was instinctive. It just kind of came to me. But the more I was in it, I kind of just thought, early in my career, this is what people do, right? I mean, good human beings just, they talk things out. They work it out, they figure it out, they forgive each other, they move past it and all that. And then I realized, no, that's not what a lot of people do. It's actually quite hard. And so it began to occur to me that, well, this is a thing. And there's so many people doing really good work in the world and they're getting derailed by solvable people problems. I'd love to contribute in that space. So that's when I launched into the work I'm doing now, which is now about 15 years ago. It was really with that mission, which remains, the work has evolved, but it's basically still the same thing. I want to work with people that are doing a good thing out there in the world and help them make the people part of it as joyful and energizing and collaborative as possible. So that's really the heart of what I do.
If you're ready to take your pet care business to the next level, then I want you in the room at the Dog Co Business Summit, October 2nd through the 4th in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. We have brought together the very best speakers we could possibly find, and we are getting the best companies in the room to help give you the path to grow and scale your pet care business. Go to dogcosummit.com to learn more.
And that can be
Yeah.
a source of a lot of stress, especially in small and mid-sized business in the world that you're in. That's,
Mhm.
you're not hiding behind thousands and thousands in a massive corporate environment. You're
Yeah.
in a place where relationships matter. And so serving in small and mid-sized business and helping those relationships really be good. That's a lot of fun for me.
Well, and that was a big reason that I called you to see if you would be open to speaking at the summit, because kind of a running joke in our industry, at least with the sector of clients that I serve, which are team-based companies, we're a bunch of animal-loving people who ended up in incredibly people-intensive businesses. Like,
Right.
this business model is founded and sustained by relationships, both on the client side and the employee side. And the client side, I think, can feel a little more direct. It's like there's a transaction, it's a little bit more clear. On the employee side, it's a lot of people and it's a lot of dynamics. And it's so incredibly difficult for a lot of clients that I work with when they start to realize, like, shoot, I'm like a people leader. That either wasn't what I feel like I signed up for or feel equipped for. So the work that you do is so incredibly relevant to the clients that I work with.
Yeah, it's good, and it hits me as you're speaking. There's an analogy there to larger environments that I have worked in, like, you take a hospital or medical system, something like that, and you take a person who's a great nurse, and now she's being promoted to being
Hmm.
a manager, nursing manager for the floor of a hospital. Well, she's a great practitioner at that nursing skill, but now she has to manage people, and that's a different type of work. So it strikes me probably in your industry that it starts with just loving animals, and it's like, oh, I could do a business, and then, oh, I'm going to need more people to do this business, and now I got to manage people. Less
Yeah.
time with the less time with the dogs, more time with the people, and it's a whole different skill set that most people haven't received a lot of specific training in, and it's challenging,
Mm,
and yeah, so I think that that's definitely underestimating the
yeah.
level of challenge that's required because again, it's like when you start anything, founders starting a business together, or my goodness, even like getting married or things of that nature. Like, what could
Mm.
possibly go wrong? We love animals. We're going to do this together. It's so exciting, all that stuff. And then life happens. You got to make decisions and things get complex. And then you got to figure out how to navigate that.
What are the most common friction points that you see come up in teams, either established teams or like right when they're forming?
Wow, those are kind of two different things, but I
Yeah.
would say the through line in both, maybe surprisingly, is it's the things that are happening before the conversations get tense.
Hmm. Hmm.
And clarity of expectations, alignment of expectations has a lot to do with it. So if you're thinking about the founder stage, then it's not doing the front end work to kind of just acknowledge, hey, this is where we're going, and to be really clear about the expectations, the divisions of labor, avoiding squabbles over who's doing more work or whose work is more valuable. Those type of things can come in early. Not enough forward thinking about, hey, how are we going to decide in those moments where we might disagree on something important? How are we going to negotiate decisions that we have to make day in and day out? So that's at the founder level. But then also as the team grows, as you add more people in, you still have to be very clear about the culture you're trying to create, the values that you
Hmm.
want to be represented in the team, how you're serving clients, how you're working together with each other, and then operationalizing those values into very specific behaviors that are observable and people can understand. It's not values in the abstract, but it's actually behaviors that are
Hmm.
going to lead to success for the team in terms of team chemistry and a vibe together, but also excellence in executing on the work. So a lot of it is leaders just staying clear and holding the line on values and how those get operationalized and being able to have very comfortable conversations around that and really quick feedback loops and that type of thing. So that's on the organizational level. And then I would say, on the human level, the biggest challenge always is going to be some form of insecurity, and just
Hmm.
discomfort around giving or receiving feedback. That is the most recurring, regardless of context. If there's insecurity around giving and receiving feedback, that's always going to lead to problems. The value of having a growth mindset and approach to the work that's iterative and like, hey, we're going to try stuff. Not everything's going to work. I'm going to fail. I'm going to keep learning. The kind of idea we're going to keep growing together, that's going to require feedback. If we're going to get better, it means we're going to have some failures and some missteps and that type of thing. So we shouldn't be uncomfortable around that. We should be comfortable receiving the feedback, learning from it, growing. But ego, insecurity, these type of things get in the way.
Is there any fast track you've seen for leaders learning how to navigate insecurity more constructively?
Well, it's hard to shift that in people, to be honest.
Mm,
And so I've found that hiring, testing for that in the hiring process and interviewing process
okay, so
is
just
pretty,
screening out
pretty
before it
crucial.
comes in. Okay.
Yeah. And you can never do that perfectly. If I just think, even in my world, clients that are going to do well working with me, if you're coming to me for help, there's something you're doing that needs to change. There's probably going to be a growth element in what
Yeah.
we do. And so the people who will do well are going to be open to that feedback, willing to take responsibility. They're not going to tend to be blamers or excuse makers. They're going to say, "Hey, what can I do to make it better?" They'll be very open to that. And so I find that hiring to that and then just continuing to message that. And then being the
Hmm.
type of leader who doesn't punish people for making mistakes, but is very approachable and creates an environment where it's safe to fail. It's safe to challenge, it's safe to make mistakes. And we work things out and give feedback. So I think just creating that culture and environment where we're trying to win, we're trying to do excellent work, but we're going to make mistakes and things are going to happen. Own it, learn from it, move on. Try not to keep making the same mistake again and again and again. Part of it is there's a nature nurture thing, right? So part of it,
Hmm.
you want people that are predisposed to wanting to learn and realize that failure is part of the process. But then also as a leader, you want to create that psychological safety. You want to create that environment where, hey, we're learning. It's okay to risk. It's okay to fail. And there's not shaming. There's not punitive actions being done, but it's an ongoing conversation of how we can keep improving.
I feel kind of bad because I'm asking you questions I did not prime you for, but that's the direction we've gone. So we'll
That's
just
right.
roll with
Yeah.
it. Do you feel that leaders can create psychological safety if they themselves are not willing to risk?
Nope.
Hmm.
That's a hard no on that. Because if the leader is insecure themselves, then no matter what words you say, it's just a feeling that people
Mm-hmm.
will have. It's going to come
Mm-hmm.
across. Look, we all have insecurities. That's not like a fatal flaw, but the self-awareness around that and doing work to overcome that. You've had to do that. I've had to do that. All of us, if you're going to keep growing and improving in your craft,
Mm.
it's going to involve some measure of pushing through fears, pushing through discomfort, being open to feedback.
Hmm.
And so if you're leading a team, it's okay if you're feeling insecure about that at the start, or you realize I'm not as good as I want to be, but you just have to be self-aware and get the type of help that's going to get you to that higher level of confidence. So just take imposter syndrome or comparing yourselves to others or this type of thing. We all have fears and insecurities deep down. It's the awareness around that. And are you doing the types of things that you need to do to grow to the next level? Are you getting the coaching, therapy, whatever it may
Mm-hmm.
be that you have to deal with the internal game, and what's going on in your own heart and mind. It's overcomable, but you got to just be able to recognize it's there. But if you just let that exist and say, well, it's everyone else's problem to learn how to adjust to me, then that's not going to go very well.
Yeah. So, one of the interesting things I've found is that whether it's like my own journey or clients that I work with, That self-awareness, if we don't have it, like figuring out how to become self-aware can be really, really difficult. Like if someone's listening to this, what are indications that maybe ego is ruling your responses and the way that you lead people?
A big one is going to be reactivity,
Mm,
if you're overly reactive in situations. So, one of the principles I teach is that leadership happens in the space between experience and response.
mm,
Okay. And things that are going to be problematic for us, there's always a delta between what I wanted to have happen and what has actually happened. Those are going to be the hard spots. So, the ability in that moment to be, if you want to call it mindful or just fully present, maintaining self control in those moments so you're not responding out of just an emotional reaction. You see the emotion, you
mm,
recognize it, but you're also fully in decision making mode so that thinking fast and slow, mastering that art of like, I have this initial reaction, but I'm going to maintain control and make wise decisions in response to this. So if it's too reactive, too quick between an unexpected experience or something I didn't like how it went, and then the instant reaction, like that's one thing. And then the other thing is avoiding, I think, hard conversations. That's a lot. Just putting off conversations that need to happen. So that's
mm.
that's another way, I look at there's usually some insecurity there. There's some fear or something that is preventing you from going to say the things that need to be said or have the hard chat that needs to happen. Which is kinda
Hmm.
what we're looking to for the fall
Yeah.
at the summit is to be able to get into that, like, we've all experienced that, right? The conversation you've had 100 times in your head, but you haven't had it in reality, and it's taken up a lot of bandwidth, and it's issues that probably everyone on the team feels, and then what do you do with that? How do you
Yeah.
address that? How do you minimize the occurrences of that? And when it is happening, how do you address it? So I'm looking forward to the summit in that regard to be able to kind of dive into that a little bit more because everybody who's leading a team is facing that or has faced that or will face it coming up.
Yeah. When you and I were chatting a few weeks ago, kind of talking about your session and what would be most helpful, we kept circling to that. I heard a quote about a year ago that I got really fixated on, and it was Chris Williams, Dan Martell, or Alex Ramosi. It was one of the three, and I don't remember which, but they were saying everything you want for your business is on the other side of a hard conversation you're not willing to
Mhm.
have. I think that is so true, especially the more I work with larger teams, like teams that have maybe a middle management tier or people responsible for people. So often, the barrier or the bottleneck in that operation is the lack of willingness of an owner to address like a real people problem.
Mm, absolutely. Yeah, I've heard that in different forms from different people, but one of the ways I think about it, all of life is negotiation. One of the ways I've heard it described, Chris Voss, if you ever read Never Split the Difference, anytime I want or I need is in the mix, you're in a negotiation. Most of us, if you've experienced any success in life, you've had to learn negotiation to a certain extent, but it's in those moments where the stakes are higher, the emotions are higher, then it suddenly becomes intimidating to have that
Hmm.
conversation. And usually, like you said, it's going to be a bottleneck. It's a high stakes moment and there's risk involved. So
Hmm.
there's some element of uncertainty, which always introduces anxiety. And you need to have it, but you can imagine downsides if you
Yeah.
go and have it, or how are they gonna you don't know how they're gonna react. Are you gonna lose someone you don't really wanna lose, but you need to correct this thing. So the higher the stakes and the more uncertainty is involved and the more perceived risk, there's gonna be a natural barrier that you have to push through. And I think that that is true, is that there's no world in which you don't feel that, but the willingness to push through that and to have the conversation at the right time in the right way, there just has to be that willingness to go and do that. And there's just no easy path. There's no pathway to progress and achieving things that are
Hmm.
important. It doesn't pass through negotiating and hard conversations. So 100%, that's
Yeah.
right. And look, that's how I'm making a living, right? Helping people to be able to have those conversations, raise skill level and raise courage and capacity to be able to go and have them. and to not be so derailed or paralyzed by those moments.
I think hitting on courage is a really important piece of
Mm,
it. I found that like the biggest moments in leadership for me tended to be when I finally stopped trying to find every other way out besides having the conversation I needed to
mhm.
have. And it does take a lot of courage. It's very scary.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, just that principle of like courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to proceed, doing the thing you know you need to do in spite of the fact that the fear is there. Another descriptor I like is fear can be in the car, but it doesn't get to drive. So it's
Mm-hmm.
there, but the driver is going to be a different motivation. So that takes pressure off too, because sometimes people are waiting until the fear goes away or until I feel more
Yeah.
confident. And any new skill or any hard conversation, always the first steps are going to be that awkwardness and deploying courage in spite of feeling the fear. And so I don't know. I find sometimes people are liberated by that idea of like they put pressure on themselves, like the fear should go away, or I got to wait till I don't feel as awkward or whatever. And there can be shame or like even people beating themselves up over that. And I'm saying, look,
Mm.
that's just there. It's okay. That's just human.
Yeah.
Don't try to get rid of
Yeah.
that. I mean, there is uncertainty. That is scary. Like you don't know what's going to happen. And it's still worth doing because of this and this. And usually the things I'm dealing with, there's that hope that there's an easy way, or maybe it'll just resolve itself, or maybe it'll take care of itself. And that's where I'm pretty confident to say most of the time, if it's a real problem, it's going to compound. It's not going to get any
Yeah.
easier than right now.
Yeah.
So I tend to take a very appreciative view, of, look, it's human to have these fears and so there's no shame around that. If you build up the right skills, if you have confidence that you're going to approach it the right way, and if you're not scared of the outcome. Part of what I do at times is coaching people, well, all right, well, let's think about some worst case scenarios. What if it just totally
Mm-hmm.
blows up? You go do this. And then you start thinking that out and like, well, I'll live, I'll survive. It'll be tough for a time, but we'll adjust and correct. So just things I'm doing to not put shame on people or pressure to get rid of fear, but say, hey, here's a way to navigate that. So
Yeah.
you got to have something that is a motivator that is big enough
Yeah.
that it will overcome the motivation to stay comfortable and avoid.
I found for me, the few times that I've been able to like wait it out long enough for fear to not be there, it's worse because what replaces the fear typically is like anger or callousness,
Mhm.
which actually is so much more relationally damaging. It's kind of like I think about this with firing. I never
Mhm.
want to get to the place where firing someone would be emotionally easy
Yeah.
because then you've lost like the
Right.
humanness of it.
Yep.
And I think that applies in hard conversations too. The fear is an indication that you care and that you
Yeah.
care about the outcome and care about the
Yeah.
individual.
Exactly. 100%. I'm glad you're pointing that out because that's another thing. Like, if you didn't care, like, it wouldn't
Mm,
be a hard conversation. If you know you're gonna have a
yeah.
conversation with someone and it's getting to the point where their job is on the line, if, you care about human beings and you want people to thrive, then that's always gonna be tough. And
Hmm.
conflating your care for someone, especially if you've hired friends or things of that nature, like, that's the worst of all, right? If you got
Hmm.
people that are close to you or someone referred them or something like that, then you conflate just your care for them as a human being with the job, like those 2 when they dovetail and it works, it's beautiful, and when it doesn't,
Hmm.
it's really super hard, so navigating that, I love, Brené Brown's thing, just clear and kind, just as a leader, just being clear and kind, and that's the problem with avoidance. Look, I'm a recovering peace faker, by the way. Let truth be told here. I was an avoider, smile at you, and just break the relationship. Not in a mean
Hmm.
way, but just like I was so uncomfortable with conflict. So it's just an amazing thing. It's kind of funny that I find myself doing the work I'm doing now, but different circumstances in my life, forced me to deal with those things in me that were hindering me. Anyway, but one of the classics for avoiders is exactly what you say is like you let it go, and you're trying to be polite and you're trying to be nice, but inside the resentment is building up. So it's just a
Hmm.
classic scenario where someone just seems nice and they're avoiding all that stuff and they flip instantly from avoiding to a really aggressive reaction. but it's because the pressure, the tensions, the frustrations have compounded and now it becomes this big blow up. It never
Yeah.
would have had to happen had things been addressed at an earlier phase. So that's the real liability in avoidance and protracted avoidance is it's going to raise the risk that once you do have a conversation, there's going to be so much frustration and tension in it that it's going to be hard to find a good way forward.
A metaphor I use with my clients is we want to address problems when we can basically treat it like resetting a hairline fracture versus
Mhm.
it getting to the point where we have to re-break a bone. And typically, I've found there is this window. That's one reason I tell clients when you're onboarding new employees the first 30 days, it doesn't matter if the feedback is minuscule. Give feedback, normalize it, make it culturally a thing where you're just going to hear from me because I care about you succeeding. Because if we wait to deliver feedback until there's this huge problem that usually we've been stewing on for quite a while, it's become this big like inflection of our entire perspective on this person and their performance. Not only is it we're delivering so much more than we would have before, this person has also not been acclimated to receiving feedback within the culture. I found even if they are the type of person that receives feedback well, when you go for a year in a job receiving no feedback and then you get everything at once, even the best positioned, most mature individuals, that's very, very difficult.
Oh, it's terrible. Like, I think one of the worst things, and I've seen this so many times, the most unnecessary situation is someone comes to their annual review and they get, some good recognition, but then it's like, then you got these two or three things that you didn't even know were problems. And it was
Yeah.
happening 6 months ago, 7 months ago. And I just think that's so unfair. And I think if I'm in that seat, I'm like, why didn't you tell me? I could have been correcting that all along. And now it's this big thing in my review. Like, that's terrible. Giving and receiving feedback should be the most normal, regular thing you do as a
Mhm.
leader. You should be getting feedback. You should be interested in the feedback that they have for you. In healthy organizations, feedback is not in the hierarchy, it's not in the org chart. It's like it should come multi-directional. Should just be this is part of the work. We give each other feedback because we want to win. We all want to improve together. And when you normalize it, a couple things happen. Which one is on balance, you're going to be able to give a lot of good feedback. You're going to be able to reinforce positive things that are going on, which is going to reinforce the type of behaviors you want to see. And then things are not going to escalate into these big situations. You're going to catch it earlier on. And
Yeah.
it's just so, so valuable. There's a classic book called Managing the Unexpected.
Hmm.
And I like the way they break it out. They say early on, part of the game in managing and preparing for the unexpected is paying attention to what they call faint signals, right? So you get a faint signal of trouble that's harder to detect, but it's easier to solve if you're on it. Things that are, go on, like you've got a strong signal of trouble, like you're not in doubt as to whether that's a real problem or not, but it's more difficult to solve because it's become a bigger problem. So more frequent, less formal, you're always got a short account with each other. You're staying on top of things. You're addressing problems before they compound and become more complicated. That's the game. And so it's really, you can
Hmm.
save yourself a lot of these hard conversations by just normalizing feedback as at least week to week routine, what you do with your
Hmm.
team and employees.
I feel like there must be a real art form between early indication, like you were just talking about, where it's like we can pick up on the four warning signs, but that coming from a place of like wisdom rather than insecurity and paranoia. Because I feel like one gives you this like really
Yeah.
strategic insight. I know my people, I trust my people. If something's off, I trust myself. That's a thread I should follow. Versus I could see the other where it's like I'm always on this high alert. I'm always waiting for the other shoe to drop. I destabilize my culture with paranoia, essentially. I don't know that I have a clear question, but I'm curious, do you see that contrast in cultures? How does that play out? And how can we know kind of which side we're on?
Yeah, that's a great point, Michelle. The most helpful framing I could give that would be more neutral. Absolutely. Some people can be so anxiety driven and so vigilant, like hyper
Mm,
vigilant about
mm-hmm.
anything possibly go wrong. So there is that side of it. But the most helpful analogy for me, and forgive me the sports analogy, but it's like a football team, basketball team reviewing game film. in
Mm,
order to see what happened in a game and to prepare for the next game. And so it's just like this is what we do after the game. We evaluate, we look at film for the other team. We say, hey, what worked well? What do we need to improve? Anything we need to stop doing? What do we need to get better at? So we're just framing it as more of a routine practice, not anxiety driven, but more in the interest of we want to always keep an eye on what we're doing and make sure we are best prepared for what's coming next week or our next challenge. So I don't know if that's helpful, but the framing really does matter. If it's all anxiety driven, that's going to be problematic in the other direction compared to avoidance. So you don't want to be
mhm,
doing either of those. So that growth mindset of like, hey, we're doing work. I mean, in the pet care industry, there's complexity involved, right? Because you're dealing, with complex relationships on the client side. You're dealing with animals. I mean, things are going to happen. You're dealing with business pressures, money pressures.
mhm,
There's a lot going on. So just having everyone looking at what's going on, getting those feedbacks, then creating that environment where we're all just learning. There's no
mhm,
perfect week, but that's not anxiety driven. It's just like this is life, and we want to not obsess with perfection, but like just keep improving a little bit every week and evaluate what we're doing and see if there's a way to do it better. Getting that framework, that's the best way I can say. It's just how you frame
mhm,
it with yourself and the team can
mhm.
be helpful for it not to be anxiety driven. It's really growth and learning driven.
Steve, what do you hope for companies in 2026?
2026, I mean, when you ask it like that, mainly I can relate it to myself. I mean, I'm a small player. I'm just like a little small business. I'm trying to make this happen out there in the world. And when I think about 2026, I'm having flashbacks for myself to 2020
Mm,
and things were going pretty well for me, and then COVID happened and everything shut down, and in that moment, for me being a small player in the pond of, leadership coaching and consulting and whatnot, I lost all my work. Except for one client, I lost everything within the matter of 4 weeks, and it was the scariest time I've been through really kind of personally and professionally. There were a lot of different things going on. That's a whole big story I won't tell, but I had to get serious help at that time. I mean, it's kind of a miracle that I survived that, but there are lessons that I learned that I don't think the world's going to shut down in 2026, but it's pretty volatile out there. There's a lot of crazy things happening, a lot of volatility in the
yeah.
environment. And so when I think about businesses in 2026, I'm like, all right, am I focused on the things that are positioning me to weather the storm, regardless of what happens? And so when I think about priorities, that's why I think you've really chosen great emphasis and great topics for the summit
Mm,
because number one is never going to go away is just keep serving your people really well. And I think in the pet care industry, you've got an advantage because whereas I became kind of luxury dollars in a moment with the way it was working out in 2020, I mean, people are still going to care about their pets and they're still going to have other things they need to give their time to. They're going to need support in helping take care of that pet that they love. And so customer service is just still big. And so that's one thing I know I want to be indexing hard on taking care
mhm,
of the people who've entrusted me to work with them. And I want to go above and beyond. So I'm really doubling down on that so that it's less likely that in crisis, if it happens, that I'm going to be perceived as a luxury or a nice to have. I want to be, adding so much value
mhm,
that, hey, we're going to keep him. So I think about customer service and the other thing I think about in 2026 with all of the polarization
mm,
that's happening out there, Donald Miller was so helpful to me,
mm,
just the story brand approach, because I was sheepish about self promotion marketing. I couldn't really get my mind around that. So his whole approach of positioning yourself as the guide and the client as the hero was it just unlocked the whole realm of marketing for me. And then also the
mhm,
other thing I appreciate about the approach is it's kind of a thing within marketing. You got to choose an enemy. And there's so much in our world that's pointing to other people as enemies, trying to promote your own success at someone else's expense. And I like what came to me out of that is like we have enemies, but it's not the competitor, it's not the other person. But like in my world, just say avoidance is an enemy or fear is an
mhm,
enemy. So just having that thing of like, be the guide, help other people win, do everything you possibly can to do that, and then name the enemies that people are dealing with. Hey, you've got an enemy inside. It's, the fears that you're dealing with, the anxieties tied to uncertainty about how it's going to go. Let's fight that together. Let me help you guide you through that. So I think the same thing, if I think about businesses, especially in small and mid-size in 2026, I'm like, keep serving your people and don't give in to the polarization. Stay out of the comparison. Just serve people well and identify the real enemies that people are dealing with. Don't make it other people. So that's how I think about it, Michelle. That's why I love what you guys are doing. To me, part of my deeper mission is, like I said, I want to help. I really want to serve people who are doing good things in the world. So I just think you're in the pet care industry. Like, that's just a good thing in the world, right?
Yeah.
It's people, it's something brings joy, it makes people happy. It's just like, it's just a positive industry. And
Hmm.
so not caving into some of the things that our culture tempts us to do in this moment, but just keep serving people well and being a positive presence in the world. Like, I just feel like in the end, that's always going to win in the end.
Yeah.
People call me naive about that, but I'm not abandoning that cause. Keep doing the right things, treat your people well, and serve your
Mm.
clients well, and stay out of the madness. I think that's the best play. That's how I'm living it anyway.
Here, here. Thank you for coming on today, Steve. I took a lot from this, and I know that the audience will as well.
Fantastic. It's good to be with you. Looking forward to October. Maybe I'll get to meet some of you guys in person at that time.
Oh, yeah. I'm excited for you to meet my people. They're good ones. If people would like to learn a little bit more about you before the summit, where is the best place for them to do that?
Best is just go check out my website. I don't have a huge social media presence. I have some socials out there, but not super active. But my website is C as the letter C, cstevebeck.com. And you can go there and check it out.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. And thank you for speaking at the summit. I think it is really going to be a phenomenal session.
Yep. Looking forward to it. And selfishly, I'm eager for what I'm going to learn in the summit as well. So I'm really looking forward to being there.